Guys, believe it or not, Suns basketball is back tomorrow.
Is that a threat?
I can't wait.
Hey there, welcome on into the PHNX Suns show, of course presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app, use code PHNX365 when you sign up and find out why, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary over at Bet365. Welcome on in, everybody. I'm Eric, that's Booger Boy. Stevens, that's Goo-Goober. Gerald, and the Vibe Killer, Noah behind the Mac, making all the magic happen. Me, all my nicknames are PHNX Sun Devils. I don't get any nicknames here, especially since Steven made me look bad in the cold open, too. I mean,
That's tough. Did you call me Goo-Goober or just Goober? Was there a double
ooh,
goo?
Goo-Goober kind of goes crazy, too.
I couldn't tell.
Now you're making fun of my stutter.
I
Wow.
am not.
I mean, we're
I'm-
off to a hot start.
I'll never accept Booger Boy or whatever you want to.
What's up, Saul, Chunky, Kev, Michael, Matrix, Sparrow, Nicholas, everybody who's in the chat hanging out with us on a Wednesday afternoon. We thank you all so much for spending your time with us. And for those of you who are coming back later on YouTube, listening on audio, you're all part of the family. Just make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to PHNX Sports as we do enter the final quarter-ish of the season. And if you're listening on audio, drop those juicy 5-star reviews. Let us know why you like listening to Gerald's sweet voice every single day. We got a packed show for you today. We're going to be talking about what the Suns need to do to consider this season a success. We're going to talk about what our diehards believe in that as well. Suns strength of schedule, looking forward a little bit. But first, I want to remind everybody that this Sunday, we have a watch party. Woo!
Whoop, whoop.
That's right. Suns are taking on the Raptors, and this Sunday, you can come hang out with us at Gila River Resorts and Casinos Wild Horse Pass. It is absolutely free. Tip-off is at 4. Our pregame will be at 3:30. Come hang out, watch basketball with us. What are your guys' favorite parts about the watch party?
It's the ambiance.
Oh, yeah, Gila?
It's always fun watching games with fans. Obviously, getting to interact and meet people too, but the ambiance is always the live reactions past just us 3 or us 4 at times.
Mhm.
Getting those other, yeah, just randomly, or somebody talking crazy after they saw something that they didn't like. That's always fun to hear.
Yeah, I like just being able to mix it up a little bit because most of the times we're watching games just the 3 or the 4 of us, which is fun, but it's nice when we get to interact with some of our diehards. We get to share in Suns basketball, the highs and the lows of it, and enjoy some good food most of the time while we're doing it.
What Gerald is saying is that he enjoys not being forced to talk to us during games. He likes having options.
I'd rather talk to you guys.
No, I mean, that's fair. I would too, to be honest with you. It's going to be really fun, and it's, again, absolutely free. Come out, have a couple drinks, have some food, watch the game. Hopefully, the Suns can start off on the right foot. Of course, they have a game tomorrow night, a later game, and a game on Saturday as well. So we'll have kind of an idea of how they're attacking this post-All-Star break. And I asked a question in our Diehard Discord. If you don't know what that is, you can become a diehard over at gophnx.com. Has all sorts of things. You get exclusive articles and reporting from Gerald. You get access to our Diehard Discord, exclusive content. And in the Discord, I asked a very simple question. I asked, what would you consider this season to be a success? Like, if this happened the rest of the year, and we had a wide variety of answers. Let's break it down one by one, give our thoughts. Then we're going to talk about what we need to see in order to get to those spots. So let's start it off with Mark, also goes by Bread Bowl. Very simple first answer.
Okay.
That a direction is found with this team. Like, it's such a low bar, and this is him speaking. If you find that this team isn't a big 3, but a big 2, and it becomes more like the Clippers by season end. If we become a defensive team, done. Offensive team, done. Give me a direction.
I think that's fair. I think it's a very low bar to clear. I don't know if we're going to get that Like
It took us 5 minutes
I
to
know,
get depressed again.
I hate to be so pessimistic, but in terms of like we know that this is more of an offensive team just because they have been so bad defensively. I would like to see more of an identity other than just we want to take a lot of threes, especially when that part of the identity has wavered throughout the season. But it would be good to get some clarity on, okay, what are we doing moving forward with this group? Like everybody needs to be under the microscope for the rest of the season in terms of, can we build a winning championship caliber product around Devin Booker and blank? Can we do that in the near future? Or is this someone we need to trade? Is this someone that we need to consider letting loose? Everybody needs to be up for that type of evaluation at this point.
I think the direction is loudly stored in the record, 26 and 28.
Mm-hmm.
That means the direction is going this way.
Mm-hmm.
He's pointing down,
been
by the way.
500 for the most part all season, so it's going like this.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier this season, it was very much straightforward, an up arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Then it slowly descended here, then it got there, and now it's here. Get it back to here, and then you can start to turn that corner. That's the direction that they're headed right now.
Yeah.
Can they reverse those ties? You got 28 games.
Well, part of that is, it's very simple. Our next one is from, he calls himself Ogre, so we'll call him Ogre. Ogre McFubin, by the way. Don't skimp on the full name.
Mm-hmm.
Says, success would be making games fun to watch. Seeing a team of dudes vibing and loving the sport, my bar is low, but that's all I want. Do we feel like the first two answers kind of go hand in hand? It's hard to be vibing and having fun if as a unit and as a team you don't have a clear direction.
Yes. And I think part of it is the fact that when we watch this team play, a lot of nights, it doesn't look like there's belief in what they're doing. It doesn't look like there's that buy-in or that sustained level of focus and execution that you get from teams that have established their identities, that have played together for long enough to have that trust in each other and that familiarity with what everybody's doing on the court at the same time. And part of that is, obviously the coaching turnover we've seen the last few years, the roster turnover on top of that, the injuries as well. But a lot of that is effort and within their own control. So I think part of building an identity is just showing up and playing like you give a damn on a night-to-night basis. And I don't think it's that these guys dislike each other or that they don't care. I just think that when you don't believe in what you're doing or you've lost that faith or that trust, it shines through in your effort. It shines through in your execution. And that is kind of why we're sitting here wondering, okay, what is this team's identity? Like, we know the direction that they're going in has been this, and now it's kind of like this, but like, what can they hang their hat on? And at this point, it's basically just Kevin Durant being really good and Devin Booker being good on occasion.
Yeah, for me, it's all hidden in wins and losses at this point. There's no moral victories for this team. We knew that coming into this season. Everybody's acknowledged that they're underperforming in multiple respects. The best way to get the vibes back up is to start aligning more with what your expectations are, which is winning to a certain extent that'll get you out of the playing realm and ultimately get you into the playoffs, but not just by happenstance, by process. Doing the same things that you know work well for you time and time again in respect to each game that you're playing and getting the results that are desired.
And we'll talk about some trends later in the show that we want to see in order to get to that point. I think the next couple of games, the first 5 games post All-Star break, are probably going to be the most critical, maybe for the entire season at this point, because it's going to determine what you do. It's so much easier to build that momentum and to feel this cohesion and build an identity and see guys having fun playing the game of basketball when you're winning games. Mark says it in the chat. No team is fun to watch when they're losing, right? And losing is one thing, but losing without an identity, losing while feeling lost is extra on top of that. And so if you're able to go out against the Spurs tomorrow night and play cohesive basketball, show that you just needed a break and that you know what you're doing and you know what your mission is, because this isn't a team that owns their own pick. You can't say, oh, it could go either way and we can, make the most out of it no matter what. You need to win. And will you? I think a lot of us have reservations about that, but you need to win. And that leads to our next answer from a diehard. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Espo. Espo. Sorry, this one comes from Espo. My apologies, Espo. We appreciate you being a diehard of diehards, saying, get the 6th seed. Very simply.
Yeah, that's. I mean, get out of the play-in is basically so. That's kind of where we're at, and I think we need to reset our expectations because I think most of us know that a championship is just not realistic for this season for this particular team, given where they're at in the season. If you can climb out of the play-in and establish yourself as a legitimate playoff team, I think most of us at this point would consider that successfully turning the season around to a certain degree. Obviously, what comes after that is immediately going to wash away. Congrats, you got a top 6 seed and you lost in the first round.
Sure.
It's not going to make anybody feel any better. But considering where we are at right now and projecting forward, I do think if you make it into the top 6 seed, you successfully turned around the next couple of months at least.
That's been it. Ever since they dug the hole, I said, get to the top 6 and then roll the dice from there.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't think this team reaches what I feel like should have been the floor for their ceiling, which is the conference finals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly what their tax bill suggests.
Yeah.
But you can still salvage some success, albeit not the highest of it. You can still salvage some, and getting into the top 6 is a big step in the right direction there.
Right now, if you were the 6th seed, which the Los Angeles Clippers are, you'd be playing the Denver Nuggets in the first round. Not an ideal matchup. However, sandwich. I think Nikola Jokic against this center rotation in a playoff series.
So you saw how Kevin Durant was spoken on yesterday in the documentary, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You saw the urgency, the borderline.
Yes. Trust me.
So that being said, when you're rolling the dice, which is what I said, rolling the dice, obviously Jokic is the best player in that series. Yes. Can the inefficiencies and the inconsistencies that all of the Nuggets not named Nikola Jokic have seen this season, would that trump some of the inconsistencies if you have the number 2, bona fide number 2, arguably 1A or 1B, and then the definite number 2 best player in the series?
Yeah, you'd have
so to that point,
2 of the top 3.
And to that point, there are a lot of holes that the Nuggets can be poked at with, and the Suns can do so in ways that almost no other team in the West can. So because of that reason, I actually like the matchup for the Nuggets in the first round if the Suns go and get that 6th seed. I'll go ahead and say it now.
I think if you want to talk about possible to beat them, absolutely. Jamal Murray is a notorious playoff riser. It's funny. I actually had this conversation with Flex last year talking about if Denver would be a team that last year's Phoenix Suns would want to see in the playoffs. But what I was kind of leading to, I don't love a Denver matchup. I'm not saying Phoenix couldn't beat them. Obviously, a lot would have to change for this team if they got into a 6th seed anyway. So you're talking about, Gerald, a more successful team. But sandwiched around them are the Memphis Grizzlies and the Houston Rockets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Nikola Jokic, I love Kevin Durant. Nikola Jokic is the best player in basically any series that he plays in, even if it gets the Suns.
Right now.
And he's one of the best players of all time. I think unequivocally against the Grizzlies and the Rockets, Gerald, you have the 2 best players in that series.
I think you do. But we've also seen this team face a lot of teams recently where Kevin Durant is the best player on the court and they're still losing by 10, 15, double digits. Like I think it matters in a playoff series to a certain degree if all footing is relatively equal. Like you need Devin Booker to be the Devin Booker we know him to be for that advantage to really matter, because like I think the Houston Rockets, they could be a vulnerable team, but they're also the type of young, athletic, defensive-minded team that has given a team like the Suns problems all season. Same thing with the Grizzlies. Those are 2 teams that love to attack the offensive glass with their size, with their athleticism. Those are things that have hurt the Suns all year. So, if you're asking me now, even if they made the top 6, I wouldn't have them favored in a series against any of the 4 teams that are in the top 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, favored in a series and having a chance to win are just very different things. Like
they are, but I wouldn't give them a chance to win any of those series, honestly. Like I wouldn't, and I think that's me speaking now. While the team is 2 games below 500,
right? If
they climb all the way to top 6, obviously maybe I'm changing my thinking a little bit. But I don't know, man. We saw this team go against the Timberwolves opponent last year that they on paper matched up with very well. And they got their teeth kicked in 4 straight times. I don't put a lot of faith in what I've seen from the Suns so far last year and so far this year as well.
For me, if I'm picking between Denver, Memphis, and Houston, the Denver matchup excites me the most.
Oof. Yeah.
Because the Memphis Grizzlies and the Houston Rockets are both teams that play defense.
Yeah.
The holes that I'm speaking to that you can poke at with Denver all exist with their defense. They don't have a notable point of attack defender. Jokic is one of the most active with his hands defensively, but he's not somebody that you can't just go mismatch hunt with at times. If you can manipulate a switch with him, and it's him versus Devin Booker in space, him versus KD, him versus Bradley Beal in space, I love those chances for the Suns. In addition to that, they have rotations that Michael Malone always has his team making defensively that the Suns can exploit with insert shooter here, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Grayson Allen. You can poke at these holes with them over the course of a series so long as your defense gets to a certain level. And honestly, with the way that their defense is fluctuated in addition to the Suns, that's just a shootout all out, right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about who's a race to 120, the Suns can match up very well with Denver in that respect.
I mean, it's definitely a conversation between
no disrespect to Denver.
Youth defense, full-on team versus done it before champions, top-end talent. It's interesting. And just for clarity, the Clippers right now are 31-23 in that 6th seed. They are five games above the Suns in the standings, and they are 8 games above 500. The Suns 2 games below 500. Not great as far as how do they get there. So they'd have to play pretty incredible basketball. I want to read the next. Go ahead.
Real quick, Mark R had a good comment in the chat earlier talking about he doesn't trust the Grizzlies' lack of pick and roll offense. I just wanted to highlight that. I think that's a great point, but I don't agree with it because I think the template for randomness that Mike Budenholzer desires resides a whole lot in what they have going on in Memphis right now. The cuts, the random play, you just can't predict them. I talked about Draymond lamenting the randomness that they play with. I think that's something that's a weapon come playoff time.
Yeah, and hopefully, gosh, I pray that we're in a position to actually talk about potential playoff matchups or even play-in matchups at a certain point. I want to pose this kind of question to everybody before we go to break, and it comes by my name is Fat Mike, who dropped this response to our question, said, success for me would be completing at least one playoff series that goes 6+ games that was competitive, where we played hard with an identity and where we don't get blown out or just forget how to play all of a sudden. If our dudes play hard and give us a hell of a series, I'll still be upset if we go out in the first round, but I'll at least understand it if we get legitimately beat. So I want to do a poll. Would you be satisfied if at the end of this season, the Suns win out with a competitive first round loss? So let's just do a simple yes or no. Let's throw that poll out there. We're going to set a like goal. Yesterday was 69, a little too easy for my liking. Let's just do a nice even 100 today. Thanks to everybody who's in the chat hanging out with us on a Wednesday. Like you mentioned, Mark is dropping some fire in the chat. Ted also, hello. Kev, James, JDQ, Brian, thank all of you for being here talking with us as we gear up for post All-Star break Suns basketball. We'll be back with more diehard comments, our own comments, and more after our first break. I get to do the sound again.
Oh, do
This
you?
will be my 4th straight show on PHNX where I can go. You hear that? You hear that, Gerald?
Unfortunately.
I'm getting applauded in the background because NASCAR returns to Phoenix Raceway March 7th through the 9th. Last year, a lot of us here at PHNX got to go out to the raceway and got to go shoot some fun stuff out there. Got to go around the track in a car as well. It was really cool. And all the stars of NASCAR are going to battle it out in the Shriner Children's 500 at Phoenix Raceway. There is nothing like witnessing a live NASCAR battle at 200 miles per hour on a 1-mile oval raceway in the foothills of the Estrella Mountains. Literally, let me paint you this picture. You're driving in, and Steven, you haven't seen this yet. You got to go to this event. You're driving in on a street and you're going up and all you see is mountains. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, this like entire stadium emerges. It's so cool. Go get your tickets and experience it at phoenixraceway.com. And if you're trying to get a car of your own, guess what? I get to do it again.
Oh, no.
Shout out to our friends over at Sanderson Ford. And in celebration of Arizona being the 48th state of the union and Ford trucks being #1 in sales for 48 straight years, Sanderson Ford is celebrating President's Day with a presidential sale on 848 new vehicles, many with savings of $4,800 or more. If you're sensing a theme here, they're still trying to help you out. Save up to $4,800 on Bronco Sport Badlands. Save $10,000 off of an F-150 STX and XLT trucks, and save $10,000 off of a full-size Bronco Badlands. Sanderson Ford also has 25 quality pre-owned vehicles to choose from, priced at $25,000 or less. Shop with no hassle, no pressure, no nonsense, and see why Sanderson Ford is America's most awarded Ford dealership for complete customer satisfaction. don't miss the Sanderson Ford presidential sale. Thank you all who are voting in the chat right now. Early returns are saying no. 69% saying they would not be satisfied with a Suns first round exit in the playoffs this season. Chat, I want you guys to let us know what would make you satisfied with this Suns season. Gerald, if when it's all said and done, the Suns battled out, they made it to an actual playoff series, either through the play-in or through making seeding, and they lose in a competitive 6 games. How would you feel?
Given where we are right now, I think that is the best case scenario. And saying that is the problem. That alone speaks to where we're at and how we should not be where we currently are at. I think it's okay to acknowledge that at this point, our expectations for the Suns are basically like first round. Like if you can get a top 6 seed and be competitive in a first round series, maybe win a series, that's kind of the best case scenario. And that is what is alarming to me, because we came into this season expecting this team to have a puncher's chance at winning a title. Definitely not going to be the favorites over Boston or OKC or teams like that, but they needed to be at least in the mix of that. And instead, we're 2 games below 500 talking about how a first round playoff appearance would be good considering where we're at. That's not good enough, and that is a problem for me.
Yeah, I mean, that the conversation shifting from conference finals or highest level of competitive second round series if the matchups don't sway in your favor, all the way to being okay with playing past 4 games in the first round. That entails everything right there.
Right.
Yeah. It's tough because you don't want it to be true. Right?
No.
You like we have Brian in the chat saying all he wants is the world championship, right? Everything in it. Like you want that Larry O'Brien. You want to be considered the best team, and that's exactly what this team was built to be. But they're not.
Right.
And I don't see a path there. And if they do get there, I would love to be wrong. I would love to be so wrong. I want to look back at me on February 19th and just be like, that guy was so stupid. Look at what the Suns did. But they're going to have to prove it. I mean, you saw how much of a long shot it was to get them into the 6th seed. Not only would that require them winning an incredibly higher percentage of games than they have already, it would require somebody else to lose an equally low percentage of games that's ahead of them. At the same time, if you do claw and scrap your way to the playoffs, it's a success for what your standards have been set now.
Yeah.
Which is no matter what, this season's going to be a failure, right? You have to kind of take success in the failure, which is a hard thing to do, Steven, but you don't have a choice with this team right now.
No, you really don't. And it's good to taper your expectations in respect to what you're seeing versus what you came into the season expecting and obviously what the team suggests. But it's a harsh reality. Look at it through the right lens, and that'll also help you identify if and when they do turn corners, how that's coming about.
Yeah, and I think Mark nailed it in the chat that at this point, it's he's stopped watching with any sort of expectations for success. It's more about watching the process. And I think for us, looking at certain aspects of the process and trying to figure out what can be tweaked to make it better is where we're at this point in time.
And if you really do, want to torture yourself, which I would encourage you to enter with no expectations and still watch the rest of the season. There are a list of things that we're going to be looking for on how this team can build for the future and eventually get out of this that we're going to be keeping an eye on. We're going to run those by you a little bit later in the show, but you were about to say something, Steve?
No, I was just going to say it's always been about the process, at least for me.
Yeah.
Know to have expectations and whatnot, but you have to get to certain levels to do that. And the best way to gauge that, temperature check wise, bookmark wise, process.
Absolutely. Let's keep going with our diehard answers. Thanks to all of you who are responding in our diehard Discord. If you want to join there, go phnx.com/join, I believe, or just go to gophnx.com and click on that diehard tab. This one comes from Trash Gamer. Thanks, Trash Gamer. Says, I think the only real thing I want to see is the Suns average under 13.5 turnovers the rest of the year. I feel like if they do that, everything else will start falling into place. It's not like their defense is garbage. It just looks horrible when you turn it over 7 times in a quarter. They do that, the field goal attempt differential will also narrow. I feel confident in saying if they just stop turning it over, the rest will resolve itself and wins will start to pile up. And if they don't, I'll live with the result. Not that I wouldn't live with the result either way, I guess, but you know what I mean. Well, thank you for a detailed response, Trash Gamer. when it comes to limiting turnovers, it does feel like a very simple solution, but I think a lot of that comment did make sense.
It does, and I don't think it's a bad goal. I'm not trying to crap on Trash Gamer's comment here, but they have relatively taken care of turnovers compared to last year this season. Like, they're 13th in the NBA in turnovers per game. They're committing 14 a night. So if you're keeping it under 13 and a half, you're basically taking out 1 turnover every 2 games. That's very doable. It's something that they should be shooting for. But the turnovers, like we've talked about a lot of times, it's not the volume, it's the like, they just have these rashes of turnovers.
Yeah.
And where it dooms an entire quarter. And I genuinely don't know how you kind of fix that, because it feels like this team has these periods where things just spiral out of control, and it usually does start with the turnovers. So for me, it's not necessarily the round whole number for the game. It's, can you stop doing it in bunches in these quarters where you do it great for 3 quarters and then you have a terrible third quarter where it all just slips out of your control?
For me, it's not. I mean, the turnovers are definitely part of it, specifically the timely ones
Yeah.
and the live ball ones. They're 16th in live ball turnovers right now. That's a number that can certainly be better. You put that in tandem with, was it 14th in turnovers?
13th.
13th.
Yeah.
So that's very much middle of the pack. They can be better than that. That's why they brought in Tyus Jones. We don't need to rehash that. For me, it's the rebounding percentage. Do you all know where the Suns rank in rebound percentage this season?
Bottom third of the league.
Correct. Do you know what specific number?
24th?
Close.
25th.
26th.
There you go.
That's the number for me. They're not bad at getting initial stops. That's only half of defense. Defense is defending and getting a solid contest on shots to force a miss, and then grabbing the rebound. If you're conceding second shots, third shots, fourth shots to these prolific offensive talents individually or as a team, that's going to be an ultimate Achilles heel for you.
So what you're saying is that we need to get Yusuf Nurkic back.
Oh, God.
That is not what I said.
You heard it here first.
Gang rebounding. It can't just be Nick Richards bringing a big Nick energy. It can't also just be Kevin Durant, who's been very good on the boards. Who else is going to help him step up?
Listen, if Bol's going to continue to get minutes, his 7-foot frame needs to grab boards, and I think he does an okay job at doing that.
He does an okay job pursuing the ball, but there's the boxing out part of it.
Well, right. I mean, that's the difference with a guy like Bol.
And I only bring that up because teams, I've talked about it a couple times already, teams err on getting back in transition on defense. So if you get an initial missed shot forced on defense, you've done half of the job. They're conceding at least 2 bodies to the other side to stop you from getting a easy run out. So you're going 5-on-3 if everybody's crashing the glass.
Yeah,
you telling me you can't come away with a 5-on-3 advantage? Come on now.
I don't disagree.
And the rebounding has been a point of emphasis that Coach Bud and the players have been talking about recently. It is on their radar, but it's one of those things. Do you have the guts, the effort, the size to actually do it? And I think that's part of why we've seen more Bol minutes, is to just add some size out there. But to your point, he's not a perfect rebounder either. So, and we've heard them talk about it last year. We've heard them talk about it this year. Their goal is to get stops and get out and run. You cannot do that if you're giving up offensive rebounds and multiple second chance opportunities.
I'm not saying I wouldn't make the trades that had this happen, but 2 of our better rebounders are on the Charlotte Hornets right now. Sean, we appreciate you being in the chat. Also, being a diehard, put in this response to our question asking, what would you consider to be a successful season for the Suns after all this? Says, Bud accepting a, quote, all hands on deck mentality, night in and night out. What he's been doing hasn't been working. Obviously, the players are responsible as well, but guys rotting on the bench could bring some energy, and that's what this team needs. And that also plays into the final diehard response that we had. That from Devin All says, give me Bol and Ryan Dunn content. Now, I know that we're going to talk about Bud's rotations. I know we're going to talk about Ryan Dunn, and that's going to be all on our list of things that we need to see going forward with this team. So we're going to dive into all of that, react to everything. Make sure you keep sounding off in the chat. What do the Suns need to do? I'm seeing a lot about Tyus Jones. We're going to unpack all of that and hopefully hit our like goal after our second break. It is fun to watch basketball, and I know a lot of you know that from the dark days of the Phoenix Suns, that even if a team is not great, you can still find joy. One of the fun ways to find joy is maybe getting a little high while you're watching Suns games. And that's why our friends over at Pure Edibles, well, they are here for you. They're not just covered in sugar like all their competitors. They're a full-fledged candy company. They offer gummies, kicks, chews, hard candies. But I think the best part about Pure Edibles is the fact that on each tin, they tell you exactly what they are going to make you feel. If you're really, really upset about things, well, they have relax, they have unwind. If you're really, really sad and you just can't, get yourself to get excited, well, they have uplift. If you're losing sleep because the lack of Ryan Dunn minutes is haunting you in your dreams, I'm talking to myself, they have a sleep option as well. Get your Pure Edibles products from one of the over 130 dispensaries across Arizona, especially if you're trying to enjoy a Suns game a little bit more than maybe you would before the All-Star break. And another great way to enjoy games is make sure they have some great snacks along with it. And that's where our friends over at Circle K come into play. Not only a great place to quench your thirst, not only a great place to get a bunch of deals on snacks, but the best part is you can save money. Gerald, do you like saving money?
I do.
Gerald, are you a member of the Inner Circle?
Yes.
Why?
Because I save money.
Wow. It's as simple as that. Gerald got 25 cents off per gallon on his first 5 fill-ups, followed off by 3 cents off per gallon on all his fill-ups. And Gerald, are you at the special level yet?
I am.
Wow.
I'm very special.
They call it the Gerald Bourget special level, 5 cents off per gallon on every single fill-up. And by the way, if you have a big family and you're driving multiple cars, you could be all under the same account and you can continue to stack up the savings with our friends over at the Inner Circle. Plus, they have other member-exclusive deals and discounts. Join the Inner Circle for free by downloading the Circle K app today. Terms and conditions apply at participating locations. Visit CircleK.com for details. I want to kick off the things that we're looking for, and ironically enough, I want to talk about Ryan Dunn, but from a more overarching perspective. I know all three of us agree that there have been points with Mike Budenholzer's rotations that we have been left scratching our heads. So when it comes to that part of the Suns, Gerald, what do you need to see to end this season to feel at least better in that department?
I need to see a more clear pattern in terms of what is going on with the rotations, because I think that's the frustrating part for me is you have a month where Ryan Dunn is having his highest scoring month. He's averaging in January 9 points per game, shooting 48%, 35% from three. And then towards the tail end of January, his minutes just kind of drop off. And I think part of it is the ankle injuries that Bud alluded to. Maybe they're limiting his minutes a little bit more, but then he goes out at the Rising Stars game and plays and looks just fine. So is it an ankle thing, which Ryan Dunn said his ankle is fine, or is it a Bud not really trusting the rookie at this point, just like we've seen happen with Oso Ighodaro? It doesn't make sense to me. I want to see some clear evaluation. I want to see them giving Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro enough run to be able to get a better idea of year two. What can we expect these guys to reasonably contribute? I want to see Cody Martin, the newcomer. Is he a guy that we want on this team beyond this season? Because his salary for next year is fully non-guaranteed. So do we want to just save some cap space and try and get within reason of the second tax apron? Or do we see him as a guy who can help us next year? I want to see a more proper evaluation of Nick Richards and stop benching him for Mason Plumlee, who's on a vet minimum contract that expires this summer. Is he a guy that could potentially be our starting center? And if not, how much do we like him in that backup role? What can he provide for us? I need to see a clear projection forward that's just beyond this season, trying to scrap wins together. There has to be a cohesive plan in terms of what we're doing here, because right now, and no offense to Ty Washington, he's played well. By all accounts, he's earned his minutes. Like, him getting minutes over Monte Morris doesn't make sense to me if you're trying to win right now. If you're trying to look ahead to the future, why is Ty getting minutes over both of your rookies that you drafted this year? There just doesn't seem to be any cohesive plan to his strategy right now.
Yeah, if we're keeping it on the Ryan Dunn topic, there's no reason why that young man should not be playing and playing as much of a minutes load as he can take on a gamely basis. He is by far a bona fide best perimeter defender on this team. Point of attack, wing stopper, chaser, whatever defensive archetype you want to attach to him, he has work to do in each of those respects, but he is your most valuable perimeter defender right now. For that reason alone, flaws and all, he has to play for this team. They're simply better with him on the court defensively in terms of personnel than they are without him.
Yeah.
Whether they end up switching, which a lot of teams do, set a pre-screen, get him off of the initial ball handler, and then get into their primary action, he's still a better help defender than anybody not named Kevin Durant. on this team. And the length, in addition to that, just speaks for itself. So there's no reason, no rhyme, no reason why he shouldn't be playing.
And one of the paths out for this team beyond this season is internal development. You heard that a lot with Mikal, with Cam, with DeAndre Ayton, with campaign is like you almost thrived and completely lived off of internal development for this team. And it did feel like it kind of hit a point with Coach Bud where he just kind of threw his hands up. Right. Part of it was injuries. Part of it was just what was going on with this team where, like you mentioned, Ty Washington gets minutes, Bol, right, getting minutes and starting as well. If you are truly just going to look at your roster and say, what do we have here? There is one player who should be at the front of the line. That is Ryan Dunn.
Yep.
And if he's not, then you're doing not only yourself currently a disservice because he brings you value, but this is one of the players that if you're going to build a championship team, a contending team around Devin Booker, you need to capitalize on this guy when he's on his rookie contract. Because with his skills and his development, if you don't let him develop now, you're not going to get the type of value that you're going to need out of him for a team that's going to be hamstrung by all sorts of money restrictions, because we know if they do get under that second apron this summer, they're going to do whatever they can to get back over it.
Yes.
And you're still going to need Ryan Dunn. He needs to play more. But beyond him as well, Gerald, I think one of the most potent things you mentioned was the fact that we just don't understand the rotations or what's like the purpose behind it. And that goes beyond just who's coming off the bench. Let's talk about the starting lineup, because one of the things that I really want to see is a Bradley Beal resurgence. And as much as I was a fan of Bradley Beal going to the bench about a month and a half ago, it's a very clear divide right now between the Tyus Jones should and should not start. And I'm leaning towards less Tyus minutes, more Beal minutes.
Yeah. Again, it's feeling like personal at this point with as often as I keep bringing up Tyus Jones, and it's not. I feel like the Suns have done him a little bit of a disservice with the way that they put him in the starting lineup and basically relegated him to bring the ball up the court, get it to somebody else, and then play off ball the rest of the possession. And I think that's because, as we've alluded to, the big three create mismatches and advantages better than Tyus Jones does with the ball in his hands. I think Tyus Jones coming off the bench to kind of anchor that second unit as the ball handler would be good for the Suns. I think you probably would see an uptick in turnovers if you brought Tyus Jones off the bench, which would be a problem. But even with the turnover problem being what it was last year, and even with the fourth quarter problem being what it was last year, they were still a borderline top 10 offense. This team is not that, even with cutting down on the turnovers and getting a true point guard to run the show. Like, you need to put your best players out on the court. You need to give them an opportunity, because a lot of the big three's struggles this year, if you look at the numbers last year, they were a plus 127 and 860 minutes together, the big three. This year, they're only plus 4 and 418 minutes. But if you break it down to with Tyus Jones with the big three and without, they're a plus 40 without Tyus Jones. They're a minus 23 with him. So a lot of it is just you are playing three-guard lineups. You are going undersized, and defensively, Tyus is a liability. So you need to kind of minimize the minutes. He can't be playing 30 minutes a game if he's going to be a pigeon on the defensive end, and if he's not even really going to be running much offense for you on the offensive side of the ball either.
And to that point, that's why I said lean more into the things that have shown to work for you. They need to bring up the numbers, because Gerald did it. The difference with Tyus on the court with the big three versus the big three operating without him is quite literally night and day. And in addition to that, what also is night and day is the way that a defense has to defend when those three are on the floor without somebody that they can comfortably help off of on the perimeter. I've lamented, again, not in a disrespectful manner, but just shining light on some of the clogs in their offensive process. It's because of how teams are guarding Tyus Jones. They've ducked under screens over the last handful of weeks and could care less if he pulls up for three if he's in pick and roll. And if they're neutralizing or really even starting to take advantage of him in his where he puts all of his chips at offensively in pick and roll, if they're going under, so now he can't turn downhill, he can't get to the floater, he can't create an advantage in the pick and roll, passing it to the roller, then what else is he bringing to the table? If they're also ignoring him when he's off the ball, quite literally sending double teams off of him and just not caring if they pass it to him to shoot.
Yeah. And if you don't like the Booker Beal fit together, like, you don't even have to do that. It could be Grayson Allen if you really don't like that fit.
Exactly.
Last year it was really good. This year it is not. So either way, though, I think you need to put more shooting, more of a threat around Booker, let him run the show because he basically is right now anyway. His playmaking has been good outside of a couple of games where he's had really high turnover numbers, which is going to happen. But the Tyus Jones and the starting lineup thing, they really need to rethink it, because at this point, you've rethought almost every part of your starting lineup outside of Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Why are you not rethinking the vet minimum point guard that you brought in at any point?
And I feel like to that point, the Tyus situation, if we're looking at the numbers, night and day with him on and off, it's even more loud than when it was Nurkic, than when it was Mason, than when it was whoever else that may have started for this team over this season.
Yeah, and I get it. They promised him a starting spot, but it's not doing him any favors now either.
He promised him a starting spot. He said he was betting on himself.
Yeah,
right.
So you have to bet on yourself the right way. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm betting on myself," and then
and that's also making you worse. It's not. I don't think that starting Tyus Jones, you're just going to magically find a way to get out of this, right? And if your team's not winning and you're not doing well personally, you're tanking your value. You're going to have to take probably another vet minimum if you do get moved to the bench, even though it might be an ego hit, considering that you announced that you were going to be starting. It might be a win-win situation. And part of that also with getting Tyus Jones out of there is I want to see a more aggressive Devin Booker. And that's something that we've been saying, unfortunately, for almost the entire season. And to give him credit, he's hit stretches and points where that aggressiveness has felt natural for him. But I think is the less that you have to make him think. And I think when Tyus Jones is out there, a lot more has to go through his head on, okay, I'm not going to bring the ball up. I'm going to come off of this one. Now I'm going to get the ball from Tyus. Okay, I have 7 seconds left to do what I want to do. You're just having more layers to work through. If anything, it gets simpler when you take away just the pure point guard starting.
That's the thing, is like people are saying, okay, well, who's going to bring the ball up? Guys, these are grown professional men. If Grayson Allen or Bradley Beal or Devin Booker cannot get the ball across half court with their own handle, then what are, like, the season's way beyond lost. Like that's just sad. Other teams have guys other than their point guard bring it up at times. That cannot be a thing that holds us back and puts Tyus Jones in the lineup when every piece of data that we have says that it's killing their defense.
Let's be honest here. What are the odds that Tyus Jones comes back to this team next year?
They're not very high at this point.
For both sides, I don't think the Suns would want him. I don't really think Tyus Jones would want to come back. And even though they don't play the same position, like you mentioned Grayson or Royce, like these are players who are under contract. Look at a player like a Nick Richards or Cody Martin. Even though they don't play the same position as Tyus Jones, you need to remove minutes from some people who are in your rotation now, and you need to give them to some of the guys that you're either trying to evaluate that are under contract, like Nick Richards, or that you're trying to decide whether you're going to cut this offseason or not in Cody Martin. I feel like that's a massive thing, Gerald, that they need to focus on for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to evaluate Cody Martin and Nick Richards and obviously the rookies like we talked about, because Cody Martin's future is unclear. You could cut him and save money. You could keep him and have another point of attack defender, which you kind of lost with the Josh Okogie trade, except he's a guy that can guard wings as well. So I would like to see a little bit more of a clear strategy when it comes to, we're playing these guys because we think these guys can help us win, and we're also giving some minutes here and there to these guys because they're actually part of our future beyond this season, beyond the next couple of months. And right now we're seeing kind of all over the place, just throwing stuff at the wall to try and see what sticks, which I understand. But with the strength of schedule that the Suns have coming up, there's a very good possibility a couple weeks from now we're talking about just give minutes to the young guys so that we can see them play and let them develop, because there's a very real possibility that with all the tough opponents that they have coming up and the quality of basketball they've played over the last month, that they're not even in the running for the play-in in a couple weeks' time.
And I think even past just letting the younger guys play, I think it's the fact that we've seen them be effective in lineup constructs that are conducive to winning games. I've talked about them needing to lean into their switching since the start of the season.
Yep.
Their best switching lineups are when Ryan Dunn's on the court with Kevin Durant and also Iguodala. You fill in the 2 guard spots with your pick of the litter in terms of Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. You can throw Tyus in those lineups and they can switch. So now he's less of a defensive pigeon, or what I call a Waldo, for people to pick on. There's ways to go about it. I just don't feel like we've been watching them do it. And when you take 2 of your best defenders in Iguodala and Dunn out of the equation, mostly, if not completely, where is your defensive stop and where is your defensive prowess coming from at that point?
Yeah, it's a twofold. right? Not only do you want to see for the future, but I think there are players that give you a better chance now. We're going to dive more into the strength of schedule. We have a couple more points for people to focus on. Plus, just going to keep you updated. The Suns don't have an open roster spot right now, but of course, moves can be made, and the buyout market, of course, is very hot right after the trade deadline. So we're going to get you up to date with all of that as we put a bow on this on another edition of PHNX Suns. If you are looking to buy your home, well, listen, maybe you're a seasoned pro, maybe you're a first timer. No matter what, it's tricky to find the right home to buy, and that's why I recommend our friend Carol Royce. Now, it's competitive, but like a great coach in the market, Carol Royce will build you a game plan to get you into the perfect home. And I want to give a special shout out to Hayden. Hayden is a PHNX Sports fan and just bought his first home with Carol Royce. You want to know why Hayden bought a home with Carol Royce, Gerald?
Because he's smart.
Well, yeah, and he also wanted to become a VIP buyer. I get access to off-market properties that haven't been picked over. You won't find these homes on Zillow or Realtor.com. And when you go with the Carol Royce team, you'll know you get the best home for the best possible price. If you're trying to find your dream home, take the next step. Call Carol Royce or visit Carol online at carolroyceteam.com. That's carolroyceteam.com. Terms and conditions do apply. Also, absolutely love telling all of you guys about our friends over at Bet365. Now, we've had a break from games, which means that we've also had a break from losing our Bet365 daily bets. However, there is no better place to put some money down if you are trying to, bet against the Suns, take the unders, take the other team. If you really think the Suns are going to be that bad, might as well walk away with a little bit of money. And Bet365 has over 90 million users worldwide. They live stream over 780,000 events each year. Early payout offers for all NBA games. If you take money line and your team goes up by 20, even if they blow it, even if they lose by 40, you're still getting money in your bank account thanks to our friends over at Bet365. And right now, new customers get $100 in bonus bets when you bet $5, win or lose. Sign up, use code PHNX365, deposit 10, place a bet for 5 and get 100 in bonus bets if your bet wins or loses. Bonus bets can be used on the spread, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. You must be 21 plus and physically located in AZ. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, text NEXT STEP to 53342, or visit problemgambling.az.gov. Thanks again to Mark, Swag, David, Brian, Nicholas, Sparrow, everybody who's in the chat hanging out with us on a Wednesday afternoon. We're inching closer to the like goal, but we're just not there yet. Need y'all to hit that like button. We've talked about individual players and we've talked about rotations. And before we get to the strength of schedule, which is standing in the Suns' way, there are a couple other things that we are looking at as far as what we want to see from the Suns. How about generating three-pointers? Something, Gerald, that they've fluctuated a lot this season.
Yeah, they started off really strong. They were top 10 in three-point attempts, and they had those couple of weeks where they were bottom 5 in the league in that. Now, recently, we've seen them kind of tick back upward again. I want to see that stay consistent. And for me, this is not just a, we need to shoot threes type of thing. This is a barometer for how are you generating offense against better defensive teams and better quality opponents? Because like we mentioned, Suns have one of the toughest schedules in the NBA to close this season. You're going to be facing a lot better defenses than you have for the most part of this season. So are you still able to generate offense out of it? That question has been hit or miss throughout the season. So if you want to get your year back on track to any sort of degree and even sniff the playoffs, you're going to have to generate a lot of threes against a lot of these teams.
The three-point shot is what they value most with the head coaching change from Mike Budenholzer to Mike Budenholzer from Frank Vogel.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the process part. Like the arbitrary three-point number is cool, but what's the process looking like? How are you generating them? And what's the quality of those shots that you're taking from whatever actions you're running in process? Need to see more Devin Booker with pick and roll. He's been very good. This has been his best playmaking season, stemming from a season where he took great strides last season as the primary ball handler, point guard, if you will. You lean more into it. You lean more into it kind of prematurely last season because of the roster construct, but now he's giving you credence to doing it because of how well he's done so when he's operating in pick and roll, whether you get him in movement, and then he's playing off of the double teams that he sees. Most of their three-point shots and their most healthy quality of shots are coming from his hands, primarily or secondarily. And then the other one is Kevin Durant. Are you getting him his touches in spots where he can tilt the defense, make the rotations a little bit more foreign than they are from just rotating out of pick and roll and then playing from there?
Yeah, I not to sidetrack, but Noah in the chat just said hit that like button. There will be a surprise if we hit the goal. I think I've seen the surprise. I saw it get loaded up, and I need you guys. I need you guys to hit this like goal. I need you guys to get 100 likes. I need it so bad. Please. Please. I also need an offensive identity, whether it comes from three-pointers or playing through your superstars or starting a consistent lineup, injuries aside. It goes back, a lot of this goes back to Mike Budenholzer. And I don't want to scapegoat a coach because a lot does still go on the players. But when you get this far into the season and we have concerns and questions like this, where we're saying, what would a success be? How can we measure this team? And it's find an offensive identity, and we're in February, it just kind of paints a picture of why we're even having this conversation in the first place.
Yep, pretty much.
Well, there were a couple more things to round this out. Getting timely stops defensively. Steven, I know this is something that you wanted to focus on a bit. Where have you seen them lack that so far?
Well, part of it is the turnovers. I haven't been bad with turnovers, but again, it's the timely ones. There's simply no defense. The best advantage that can be created is transition. And if you're conceding transition via live ball turnovers where no one can get in front of the ball, that's half of the battle there. So mitigating that goes hand in hand with being able to get the timely stops. And then when you get to playing defense, can you find pockets of games where you sneak Nick Richards up to the level? So where he can either be in a lateral where he's flat hedging out for 1 or 2 dribbles to allow for the screen navigator to get back to the ball and then dropping back to the big that's rolling? Can you get into your switching lineups for pockets of games just to throw an offense's rhythm out off course over the course of a game? It's just like boxing. Can you just throw a counter punch for a subtle moment of a game to shift things and allow for your identity that you lean into most offensively to kind of play to that? Finding these little pockets to do that within their process defensively is a big piece of where I feel like is a gap. If they don't do it, they'll stay where they're at. If they do it, they can take those strides towards the 6th seed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ties in with what we were talking about earlier about getting rebounds, getting out in transition. It's all, they're all connected, all of these things that we're talking about. And so this is the great way to wrap it up. If you do all of those things, you can get back to this last one, which is having fun again.
Let's have fun.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. I mean, seriously, as much like the playoff question is still in there. If you want to vote on the poll, let us know on Twitter if you are not, listening live right now. All the goals are fine, right? We want the team to win. We want to enjoy it as well. And that usually is where fun stems from. But if at the end of the day, we're leaving games entertained, I'll take that
over
at this point.
What we've gotten.
Right. It's slight improvements. Do we have anything else on what we're looking for the season before we take a peek at their strength of schedule, potential buyout candidates and whatnot to end the show?
Yeah, talking about where they were their most successful this season, that start to the season, what was it, 8-1, 8-2, whatever that record was, and looking at the things that they were doing in that window offensively, I did a Steven study breakdown, one of my first ones when the season started. All 3 of Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant involved in the same action and 2 players spaced to the second side. One of them is setting a screen for Kevin Durant to go from the top of the key to the block. It's called wedge action. And the other one is just sitting there dribbling. That can go into a pick and roll. Durant can set a screen, and now one of your big 3 is one pass away from that. Can't switch it because Kevin Durant is going to score over whoever he gets switched onto. You can't help because of who's the shooter that's a pass away. They haven't ran that action in over 3.5 months at this point. In addition to that, when was the last time we've seen all 3 of the big 3 players involved in the same action? In addition to that, how often have we seen those two of those 3 involved in the same action outside of a pick and roll to manipulate a matchup? Like, there's just so much that's left on the table with this team within their offensive process. I feel like it's not hard to identify what they were successful with. It's just a matter of, are you going to go back to doing those things, or are you going to continue to experiment with this randomness and things like that have quite literally led you to mediocrity?
Yeah, Mark in the chat says, the team simply doesn't fit. I'm not blaming Budenholzer. I don't think Budenholzer should be a scapegoat, but what you said, I think, paints a picture of, sure, this team doesn't fit. Gerald, the pieces that we thought that were going to be better have not been. But it goes so much more beyond that as to why this team is failing and why they're lacking. And if you're saying they haven't run a play that helped them in their most successful stretch of the season in 3 months, that's not a player problem.
No, it again, everyone involved bears their share of the blame for
Correct.
what we're seeing.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that was fun.
Yay.
Are we having a good time?
Do we
yet?
feel better? Suns are back tomorrow.
Woo!
Let's
Hey,
go.
Listen, beat the Spurs tomorrow. I'm all the way back in. Okay. Convincing win against the Spurs, and I've never doubted this team in my entire life until they play again. Let's take a look. We've mentioned the strength of schedule a couple of times. NBA Tankathon put together this. I really enjoyed it. I love the visual here. The Phoenix Suns have by far and away the hardest strength of schedule remaining in the NBA. The strength of schedule for the remaining opponents is at 541 winning percentage, so well over 500, including a game against OKC, Cleveland, 2 against Boston, 1 against the Knicks, 2 against Memphis, and 1 against Denver. There's an easiest opponents column where every other team has 6. The Suns have 4. And that includes tomorrow night's game against the Spurs. They have 2 games against the Spurs left, 2 games against the Bulls, 2 against the Raptors, and 2 against the Pelicans. It is going to be an uphill battle, not just internally, Steven, but externally for the Suns to get to where they need to be.
It is, but again, you have to just strip the looking at what teams they're going against. You said it best. I've rehashed it a handful of times. It's the Suns against themselves. When they've not beaten themselves, they pretty much beaten almost every team in the league, excluding like the top 3 and 2 of the top 4, and 2 of the top 4 they haven't played yet. Obviously in Boston, and I can't remember the other team I was thinking about. But to that point though, if they can just not beat themselves, that's like 3/4 of the battle for this team. We're talking about turnovers being one of the biggest thing, issue-wise, timing-wise, and rebounding. Those are things that you look at internally before your opponents.
Yeah, and it's jarring looking at that image and being filled with kind of a sense of dread, because a couple of seasons ago, we would look at something like that and be like, hell yeah, like bring it on. And it just doesn't feel that way. And maybe that's just me projecting on the outside, but I would like to see them approach it that way over these last few weeks, because they know that this team is not up to snuff. It's not playing up to expectations that they had for themselves, that other people had for themselves. So I would like to see them embrace the difficulty of this upcoming schedule. They did themselves no favors by putting themselves 2 games under 500 with this gauntlet that's left for them. Now you got to embrace the struggle, because if you don't, you're looking at a situation where pretty much everyone outside of Devin Booker is on the chopping block come summer.
I don't disagree with you. I think that if they do turn this around, if they do end up being in the playoffs, it's going to be more believable than a fluke, considering the strength of schedule. But also, let's throw that graphic back up really quick. I want you guys to let me know if you see a pattern with other top teams
in terms of the strength of schedule.
Let me just read this for you. Phoenix is at 1, Sacramento 2, Denver 3, Memphis 4, LA 5, LA 6, Milwaukee 7, New York 8, Utah 9, New Orleans 10. Let's talk about the top 6. What do all top 6 have in common?
Western Conference teams.
And what do 2 through 6 have in common?
2 through 6, they're all
above the Suns in the standings right now.
Yeah.
So the only team right now that's kind of within this range, it's Dallas and Golden State, which are in the play-in, that are outside of the top 10. And just to paint a picture, Dallas is at 20, Golden State is at 22nd. So Minnesota, Sacramento, the Lakers, the Clippers, 4 teams that are directly ahead, and then Denver and Memphis, who are at the very top, so that doesn't matter as much, are going to be facing almost as difficult of a schedule as Phoenix if the Suns do end up winning, because they're going to be playing some of these teams, and the other teams falter, whether from injuries or from a tough schedule. You can see a path there for them. They just need to capitalize. Speaking of paths, if you're watching us on TV, the path always leads to GoPHNX.com. We're always having fun, whether it's Suns, Cardinals, Diamondbacks, ASU, U of A, Mercury, Rising. We have everything in written, video, audio form, all in one convenient location over at GoPHNX.com. As we're rounding out here on a Wednesday show, before we start hitting some post games, Steven, I know you wanted to inform the people about potential buyout candidates. Now, Gerald, there is a disclaimer before we talk about who are potential buyout candidates.
Yeah, a couple of them, honestly. Like, obviously, the Suns do not have an open roster spot at this point in time, so they would have to waive someone, and I'm sure people in the chat are going to say this, that, name, or the other. but you have to make sure that if you are adding a buyout candidate, they are better than what you currently have on your roster, because otherwise there's no point to that. You also, because the Suns are a second tax apron team, cannot take a player whose contract prior to being bought out was more than $12.8 million. So, that would rule. I've seen people suggest like Ben Simmons, if Ben Simmons gets bought out. Ben Simmons made like $40 million. So
he's on the Clippers
it's
now,
a little bit more than $12.8 million. And the last thing is that, according to a source that I spoke to around the trade deadline, the Suns don't really view anyone on the buyout market as someone that can come in and help them. So it feels pretty unlikely that we're going to see a name come across that fits that category of, oh, wait, this guy could actually help us.
But
but to be thorough,
just in case. Plus, these are guys that could end up on some of the other teams that are contending out there that you're going to be competing with to make a run in the Western Conference. So, Steven, you had a couple names you wanted to run by everybody.
Yeah, I'll start with names first that are actually available and then kind of trickle down the list from there. Start with Dennis Smith Jr., also nicknamed June. One of the best, most stingy, most staunch, most disciplined at the point of attack.
Is this just because him and J. Cole are boys?
It's not.
I'm kidding.
It's because the Suns lack a point of attack defender outside of, and he would generally be their best point of attack defender, even with Cody Martin on the roster right now. I think the Suns could greatly benefit from a point guard that's bigger, that can't be taken advantage of. They can add to what Ryan Dunn does, especially if he starts, in terms of setting the tone for your defense, picking up 94 feet, making players turn 3-4 times, navigating screens without need for anybody else to help him. And he's also a player that we saw last season with the Brooklyn Nets even be a wing stopper at times, scramming guards out of mismatches in the post like he's Giannis Antetokounmpo or LeBron James, and he's almost half their size and getting like stops efficiently. He was one of the 17 best point of attack defenders last season, and if you put it to players that played over 1,000 minutes last season, he goes to top 15, top 14. And Josh Richardson is a name that I put on there as well. Not nearly as good at the point of attack, but another rangy wing type defender that gives you size at that guard position / wing position. And then if we look at players that weren't candidates like right now, but that were kind of perceived to be bought out in the near future, DeLon Wright, another player that was a top 15 point of attack defender last season. PJ Tucker, Suns fans are no stranger to him. Chris Boucher, and Larry Nance Jr. Those are all names that Keith Smith wrote about over at Spot Rack, and mentioned that he thinks they might all be bought out as well. So, I mean, any thoughts on those names? Anybody stand out in particular? Also, before we speak too, Keith also mentioned that he predicts the Suns will have two players that are bought out or waived off of their contracts, Micic and Monte Morris. So factor that in. That's where I get the idea of these names coming in place of them. And I feel like they would be significant boosts for the respective things that they bring to add to the puzzle.
Yeah, so if you are going to clear out a roster spot or two by, buying out or waiving Micic and Monte Morris, would love Chris Boucher, would love Larry Nance. I do believe that Mark Stein reported that neither one of those are probably going to be bought out by their respective teams. But if they did hit the buyout market, then I would like either one of those guys. Boucher has been shooting the ball really well over the last couple months. He's having his second best season of his career. He's a little bit older, but he would address some size, a little bit of shot blocking maybe at the 4 there. Larry Nance, I think he could play 4 or 5 if you're trying to go small, and he's a good defender. He's just a smart player, so I would like either one of those.
I think Dennis Smith Jr. is interesting just because he gives you a build and a fit that you just don't have on this roster right now, and he is available. I think if you're going to cut Monte Morris and you're going to cut Vasa Micic, I see a role for Dennis Smith Jr. To be honest, I see a role for Monte Morris. I don't get why he's not playing. Exactly. He's been very consistent in his minutes. Way more consistent, honestly, than what we've seen out of Tyus Jones, despite the leash that Tyus Jones gets. I don't love the fact that I agree with cutting him because he's out of the rotation for his own sake. I see him going to a contender if he gets cut and actually contributing. But if you can replace that with Dennis Smith Jr., it is a different look. It's not a pass-first guard. It's not a guard offensively that's going to take away anything from Beal, anything from Book, anything from KD, and that's kind of what you need. So just another dog to go on ball, but just to be clear, some people in the chat are like, these aren't the players that are going to make you win a championship. Nope.
No, right.
No.
There's never been a buyout candidate
Birdman is it.
ever taking the team and raise their ceiling.
No,
so
but
no one ever
no one
prefaced that on this panel here.
Yeah.
I also mentioned real quick with Dennis Smith Jr., talks about his defense because it's just so loud. But he's also a player that can go get a paint touch whenever he wants to.
He's a great
And
athlete.
if he's in a system that predicates itself off of paint touches in that process to 3-point opportunities, that's a hand-in-glove fit. He can also finish at the basket, which is something that really no one on the Suns brings in terms of when they get their paint touches. Durant and Booker get them, but they usually get to middies or floaters. He's going to the basket and truly putting the pressure on their restricted area, which hits a little different.
Yeah, they have very little downhill presence, especially because Bradley Beal hasn't brought that to the same degree that we were used to seeing in Washington.
Yep.
We're back.
Hooray.
It's time. Tomorrow night, Suns Spurs pregame at 7, game tips at 7:30. We're going to break it all down right here on PHNX Suns. I understand this has not been the season that everybody has wanted out of the Suns. I get it. It is disappointing. I'm disappointed. We're disappointed. We're like disappointed parents over here. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to be here giving you the best coverage, laughing, crying, whatever it takes to get through it. And speaking of laughing, even though we didn't hit the like goal, I can't leave the show. I can't do it without seeing this. And I'm not going to do this often, so don't think I'm skirting around the like goal. Okay? But please just put it up on the screen.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
That's
crazy.
Oh, he made that during the show. That's you today.
That's crazy.
For those of you on audio, recommend jumping over to the YouTube video, not only hitting that like button, but checking out right around this time on the video. It is an album cover for Booger Boy, a.k.a. Stephen Prejean Garner. If you want to follow the album rollout and everything that goes along with it, you could do it at StephenPG3. You can follow the show at PHNX_Suns. You can follow Noah, but don't, because he'll probably scream and run away from you, and he also isn't really active on socials. But we appreciate him being behind the Mac, making all the magic happen. You can follow Gerald at Gerald Bourget. You can follow me at Eric Ruby. That's ERIKRUBY. Granville says Eddie Johnson was a buyout candidate in 1997 and almost single-handedly beat the Utah Jazz in the West Finals. Well, I found out a way for us to save the season.
Just have to hit on a once in every 28-year buyout candidate.
No, let's just sign Eddie Johnson. We'll see you tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.